Hi, this is Lehman, and I want to talk today about a method for predicting U.S. presidential elections. This short clip is a part of a larger Learning with Lee series where I go through the technicalities of the method, but here what I'd like to do is just summarize the method and give you my prediction, and then if you want all the details about how this works, you can get the Learning with Lee from my website. Now, one of the things that I noticed when I started observing astrologers predicting elections in 1976 was that there seemed to be a high correlation between who the astrologer predicted as the winner and who that same astrologer planned to vote for. And this suggested to me that many of us are probably too passionately involved in our politics to dispassionately predict the outcome. I saw the same thing when I examined books, that there seemed to be a lot of suggestions for this planet represents this side and that planet represents the other side, but no real way to objectively pick winners, although there were some subjective suggestions. So the model that I'm working with here was derived from work on sports prediction that I had done with Bernadette Brady, and then I took what we had started with for sports and extended it to presidential elections. It is a completely quantitative model that uses points. So everything received points, and the points are the same from election to election. It's based on the open field warfare model, which uses the first and the seventh houses, and it's based on the work of Bonatti and also William Ramsey in the Astrologia Restaurata. Ramsey mentioned that in picking sides for a contest, that the first house is given to the challenger or the party that begins the match. And so in this work, the challenger is the first house, where challenger is considered to be the party that is not in power in the White House, that does not hold the presidency, where the holder, which is the seventh house party, is the party that is in the presidency at the time the election occurs. Now, there is a problem with picking what to use for a chart for this, because what is the date and time and location of a national election? Election day seems pretty obvious, but in a place like the United States with multiple time zones and where the times that the polling places are open are set by the local cities, this turns out to be a little bit more problematic than you might think. The other factor here is not only is there issue of an event, namely the election, but beyond the actual event day, a presidential election or a political election is also a mundane event. And being a mundane event, there are a series of mundane astrological events that could be considered predictive of the outcome as well. Now, I refer to this as a statistical model, but we have to be clear. It's not statistical in the normal sense, because normally we use statistics to take out a subset of data where we assume that whatever results we get from the subset are true of the entire set. This is actually based on all U.S. presidential elections after the first one. And the reason we don't use the first one is there was no holder. There were only two challengers. But the point of calling it statistical, and I think this is the important piece, is that built into this model is the recognition that sometimes the model will be wrong. It is not always going to be correct, but we can look at what the probability of it being correct is. Okay, so what I've done here is I've shown you some of the factors that I've examined. Now, the technicalities of how I've examined them are in the longer Learning with Lee. So first I've used the Mars-Jupiter and the Mars-Saturn conjunctions. On election day, I've used two different versions. I've used a sunrise chart and a midnight chart. All of the charts I've used, by the way, are calculated for Washington, D.C. I looked at the prior solar eclipse, the prior lunation, the prior Libra ingress. These would all be mundane charts, of course. And then I've looked at the date and time the Electoral College meets and Inauguration Day itself. Both of those, according to the Constitution, are specified by date and also the time. And here you see the results historically of these different events. And so you see the highest predictive value actually comes from the prior lunation. And then the Libra ingress is also quite predictive, but in reverse. There are a couple of factors here, the prior solar eclipse and Inauguration Day, that don't seem to be predictive at all. So the highest value I've got here is 70%. But I'd like to improve the predictive value over 70%. And there is a legitimate way to do this, and it's something called a meta-analysis. And in this particular case, how you do it is you take multiple factors together and see if by using the multiple factors you can derive a prediction rate that's higher than any of the individual factors. This is in fact the case, and this is the summary for how these elections have worked out since 1900 using these methods. And I took the 7 most predictive factors here, and you see the results for them, and you also see how they predict the 2008 election. By working with these 7 factors together, instead of a prediction rate of 70% as my highest, I've improved the prediction rate to 82%. On the basis of this collective score, the 2008 presidential election should be won by the Republicans because they have a 5-3 advantage when I also include the prior syzygy, or a 4-3 with the 7 factors involved. Now I should mention that this predicts also that the Democrats should maintain control of the House and Senate.